Everyone. Hi, welcome to this exciting launch of the Ecosystem Health Check here together with Credit Suisse, Swisscontact, and Deep Ecosystems. Welcome everyone that is joining us live and those that are watching it as a recording. Glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us and thank you for being interested in measuring the health of your ecosystem. My name is Thomas Kösters. I'm the CEO of Deep Ecosystems and I'm here with my dear colleagues Andrina Schwarz from Credit Suisse, Ariane Appel from Swisscontact, and Sarah Usinger also from Swisscontact. And later on, we will be joined also by Sopara Porn from Techo Startup Center in Cambodia. Great. So let me give the word to Andrina for a short hello from Credit Suisse side. Please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Thomas, for the introduction, and thank you to our audience, again, both live and those who are watching this as a recording. As mentioned, my name is Andrina, and I lead Credit Suisse's Financial Inclusion Initiative, which aims to support the development of innovative and financially inclusive solutions to advance progress towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We do this by enabling equitable access to financial services to the and underbanked, the design, evolution, and scaling of innovative impact enterprises and financing solutions, and entrepreneurship and innovation in and through access to financial services. In this work, we've been partnering with Swisscontact to help identify best practice approaches to ecosystem building and entrepreneurship through the Credit Suisse Swisscontact initiative. At Credit Suisse, we've brought to this effort a long history of entrepreneurship. In fact, the bank owes its founding to one man's entrepreneurial thinking. Over 160 years ago, when Alfred Escher founded the bank that would later become Credit Suisse, the approach that he had then has now become an attitude not only part of our heritage, but part of the mindset of our people and our clients. It defines what we do as a global financial services provider and the way that we approach our corporate citizenship efforts. In line with this, Credit Suisse partners with organizations around the globe who are working on effective and innovative solutions to the pressing problems that our world faces today. And in doing so, we see entrepreneurial thinking as key to success. However, as the work of the initiative has shown, success is not dependent solely on the entrepreneurs, but rather it depends on the creation and development of strong entrepreneurial ecosystems that are responsive to the needs of the entrepreneurs. So how can we help provide the tools and resources to build, develop, and grow strong entrepreneurial ecosystems? That's where the Credit Suisse Swisscontact initiative and the Ecosystem Health Check come in. Over the past several years, the CSSC initiative has produced a wealth of research and case studies, and together with Deep Ecosystems, the Ecosystem Health Check, a tool which enables individuals to evaluate whether ecosystem projects are on the right track, essentially helping to identify strengths and opportunities. And today, as you heard, and as you'll hear more in just a moment, we're excited to announce the beta launch of the Ecosystem Health Check platform. The platform includes a simplified introductory version of the Ecosystem Health Check that allows you to leverage proxies and use these to identify the strengths and weaknesses, and then provides you with links to additional resources, case studies, etc., to help inspire you and help provide you with additional information to strengthen your ecosystem. From the start, we've endeavored to make our findings and resources publicly available so that we can learn from each other and so that you and us can support empowering entrepreneurs across the globe. Thank you for joining us today. And with that, I will hand over to Ariane.
Thank you very much, Andrina, for these welcome words. Also welcome from our side, from Swisscontact. Thanks for taking the time, for being here, for your interest. As you can see probably on the screen, my name is Ariane Appel from Swisscontact. I am leading this Credit Suisse Swisscontact initiative to promote entrepreneurship and innovation. And maybe just a few more things to complement what Andrina already said. For those who are not familiar with Swisscontact, we're a Swiss NGO founded plus 60 years ago, very much with the aim to contribute to vocational education training all over the world. We still do that, but we also always historically had a really strong focus on SME promotion and really this connection between the skills development and the enterprise promotion or entrepreneurship. I think what is key for us as an organization in any of these, both or all the areas where we work in, is really our systemic approach. For entrepreneurship, meaning we don't look at entrepreneurs as isolated actors, but really as part of a community or of an ecosystem, if you want. And this has been really at the core of this initiative with Credit Suisse, but also in our collaboration, basically, with Deep Ecosystem. So just very briefly, when we look back, the initiative started 2018. And several learning and a few years led to this collaboration now with Deep Ecosystem and to this ecosystem health check. And in a nutshell, what we wanted was really a hands-on self-assessment tool for ecosystem builders on the ground. And Thomas will say a few more things about the tool. We already had like extensive webinars to introduce the tool. But what we look at here today is really the platform. So where you can access the dashboard, etc., as Andrina already mentioned. And maybe one last thing I would like to say is the tool itself is not the solution. There's a process around it. And that's really one of the aims of this platform, that the content of this platform supports you in this process around using the tool. So yeah, that's the whole idea. So I would like to thank Credit Suisse, Andrina here, for their support and really partnership to make this happen. And I think also for a last time, probably Thomas and the team, Erika, Tahmina, Harald, for this collaboration, for this ecosystem health check and this platform. We're really excited that we can launch it now. As already said, it's not 100% perfect yet, but I think the functionality is there, the content is there, it's ready to be used. And with that, I'm handing over to Thomas, who can say a few things about Deep, but then also guide us through the platform and through this launch event. Thank you.
Sorry, now just in the time that you handed over to me, my internet connection broke. So sorry about this, but I am back now, and I think I know where to pick up. Thank you very much. And also, in the meantime, Soparaporn joined us from Cambodia. So welcome to you as well to the group. Later on, you will have the chance to hear from him and their experience in Cambodia using the ecosystem health check. So that is one of the examples we will showcase today. For the start, I want to give you a quick run through of what the ecosystem health check is all about. Some of the viewers might have not heard about this at all. And so we start from the beginning and quickly wrap up everything so that you understand the platform when we show you. Let me share my screen quickly so that you can see our presentation. So this is the sentence we always like to put up first, is Deep Ecosystems. It is ecosystems matter more than unicorns. And I think this belief is also what unites all of the ecosystem builders we have met along the journey of developing the ecosystem health check. It is important for us to produce beneficial outcomes of innovation for society. It is important for us that we use technology for the bettering of our lives. And if we only look at the success of one startup, that is too short. We want to support the many entrepreneurs to be able to put their ideas into action. And for that, we need a revolutionary framework that supports innovation and supports the implementation of these ideas all around the world, no matter where you are. It can't be only the Silicon Valley where innovation happens. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to be in Cambodia, it needs to be in Guatemala, it needs to be in Porto, it needs to be in Finland. So that is why the Ecosystem Health Check targets all entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders around the world and wants to give them a framework to try to understand what is needed to create that framework conditions in their locality to support innovation. If you're one of those ecosystem builders, then I invite you to join us for this journey and for the launch of the Ecosystem Health Check platform today. Quickly about the history again, or the people behind. So the initial idea was created together with Ariane, Benny, Erika Santini, and me. That has been a couple of years ago already. There is some toolkits, some publications that some of you might have already seen. There's a theoretical framework and there is a practical guide, and all of that can be found in the download section on the new platform, which is ecosystemhealthcheck.com. So that is the address that you should be typing into your browser today and see what you can find there. Under downloads, you find the theoretical framework and the guide. And then also on the platform, you will see like a practical introduction, the preview of the health check. That's the app that we want to show you today, where we can explore what the health check can do for your ecosystem in a very quick and easygoing manner. Quickly about ourselves, Deep Ecosystems is a company founded by entrepreneurs who want to build ecosystems around the world. We have done so ourselves in places like Chile, in Lisbon, in Estonia, in Munich, in Germany. And after 10 years, we have started Deep Ecosystems as an initiative to help other entrepreneurs to build their ecosystems as well. One of the leading thoughts behind all of this is that we say we can't grow what we can't measure. For example, if you see a field of flowers out there in the nature and it's really beautiful and the flowers are sprouting, you might think, oh, that's just nature. That just happened to be. That is just what happens if you leave the flowers to sprout. But is that really true? Do you really know if there is not a gardener behind that takes care of these flowers, that puts fertilizer into the ground, that makes sure that there is no animals eating these flowers, that protects them? We don't really know if that is the case or not. And that's the same if we look at success stories of very successful startup places in the world, like the Silicon Valley, like Barcelona that we often talked about, or Boulder, Colorado, which is a small town that managed to be one of the leading tech hubs in the world. We don't really understand from the outside what made these success stories happen. It is important that we start to measure and analyze the dynamics that lead to the success of startup places. We have tried to summarize in this framework that's behind the Ecosystem Health Check our thoughts on what makes places more successful in supporting the impact of the entrepreneurs that they nurture. And there's basically two cycles that we have identified. One is the recycling cycle and one is the reinvestment cycle. And by the way, that's not just us who came up with this. It's not out of the blue. This is based on the literature of both practitioners and academics that have discovered these two cycles at work in many of the successful startup ecosystems. The first one, the recycling engine, is when founders that have started out but maybe have not yet become very successful or even have failed and went bankrupt, give back their experience to younger founders. That is very important to enable more impact in your ecosystem. But the second engine, of course, is even bigger, which is when you have successful founders, successful entrepreneurs who have tried out something new, something innovative, succeeded with this, and now have money at their hand because they have either exited their company or earned a good amount of money from revenues. This is not only fortunate for themselves, but also for the ecosystem, because these people tend to believe in innovation. They tend to believe in other entrepreneurs, and they tend to give their money as an investment in new companies that are created by others. So if that happens, we actually see hyper growth in the ecosystem. The problem is that these cycles don't take place by themselves just out of the blue. There are certain framework conditions that need to be met so that this can actually happen and play out. And these framework conditions is what the ecosystem health check focuses on. We try to understand if our ecosystem is healthy and would allow for these engines to work. For example, we ask ourselves, do we have the right entrepreneurs? Do we have the right startup support structures that would allow entrepreneurs to give back their experience to others? Do we make it easy for them, or do we make it hard for them? Also, we look at social capital. Does society support innovation? Do people believe that innovation can better their lives, or are they actually thinking that entrepreneurs are just gambling away their money and are just doing the same as playing in the casino? Also, we look at governance. Are regulations and the regulatory framework supportive of reinvestments, of investments into innovation, or are they actually prohibitive? So these are the things we want to analyze on the input side so that we understand if our ecosystem is healthy. Why do we look at the input side? The reason is simple. The output is far away. The output side, like for example, the increase of venture capital investments, will take years to materialize. So if we want to see an increase of VC funding, probably we need to wait 10 years. But if today we need to decide how can we build our ecosystem, are we on the right track? Do our strategies work? We need to look at the inputs. And that is why the ecosystem health check looks only on the input side and asks, is everything in place that makes it more likely for something fantastic like these two engines to happen? Now, let me switch to the Ecosystem Health Check app right away to explain you what it looks like and how you can use the tool. So I will change the screen quickly. So you should see here now the website, ecosystemhealthcheck.com. This is where you can go to find all the information on how to run the Ecosystem Health Check and also run a small preview that is a small app that takes you through the idea of the health check and lets you compare quickly against some of the case studies that we have done in the recent months. Actually, we have, and if you click here on preview, you will see we have 7 different case studies that have performed the ecosystem health check, and that has happened really around the world. You have here Lagos in Nigeria, you have Berlin in Germany, Cambodia, Lebanon, Guatemala, Albania, Cologne. So really almost all the parts of the world you find an example, and you have the chance to test out, to compare yourself against these very cases. And we will do this in a minute so that you can see the tool in action, but let me explain you first what else you can find on the platform. If you scroll up again, you will see here under how it works, several options to, several links to go through. For example, you can find here recommended data sources. And since the Ecosystem Health Check is a data tool, you will need to have access to some kind of data. So that is true both for your own ecosystem, where maybe you need to find data sources locally, but it's also true for comparing yourself. If you, for example, want to create benchmarks based on the performance of established startup hubs in your region or even globally, then there's data sources here where you can find the numbers from these places. Now, this can be, for example, if you say, I want to look at the percentage of female entrepreneurs in Singapore. Right? So there is data sources here listed for you that you can use to find these numbers, and I think that's already quite some interesting tool. There's also here the full list of examples and descriptions of these examples. So if you click here, you can open these links. And for example, here, when you go to Phnom Penh, you will see a full description of how the ecosystem health check was performed in Cambodia, for example. So that's also very interesting to get a feeling of how to do how to execute the health check. If you then have executed the health check, or if you're just interested to learn what strategic activities you can derive from the results, there's health tips. So the platform holds available health tips for all of the categories of the health check. So for example, if you identify a strength or a weakness in one of those fields, for example, diversity and inclusivity or the startup support, then you can read here examples of other places what they have done to overcome shortcomings in this area in their locality. So for example, here, when you go to diversity, you would find here an example of the Future Females, which is an initiative in South Africa that boosted the participation of female entrepreneurs or women in the entrepreneurship world. And you can read up what exactly they were doing. And there's more examples here, for example, in Europe, Diversity VC, that is focusing on the increase of women in the venture capital industry. So that is another large resource with all 8 categories, and each of them has at least 2 examples. So a lot of reading material for you if you look for strategies on how to improve your ecosystem. But now, without further ado, I want to show you actually how the health check works by going to the preview. And I invite you to do that yourself as well at home, and maybe you want to even run it several times. So you start by entering your ecosystem's name. Since I'm today actually in Berlin at our partner, Berlin Partners, I could, for example, pick Berlin, which I'm here today, and I will not pick Berlin here as a comparison because that's of course already there. But for example, I can compare myself against today Lebanon. Why not? So the questions that I will be asked are going through the 8 categories, and I will get the question that the use case Lebanon, in this case, has filled in their ecosystem health check. So they have asked themselves, how can we measure diversity in Lebanon? And for example, for them, it was very important to look at the share of female Muslim founders as a dimension of diversity. And so if I now would use the same measure in Berlin, of course, that might be a very different number. So I would say in Berlin, there is almost none female Muslim founders. So I would say that, and I will receive here my results. So for example, in Berlin, this would translate into 0% because I said almost none. I can change that. If I say there is actually some, I can change that to 2% or something. And the tool will allow me to see the actual input that Lebanon gave in their case study. So for example, here they gave 14%, and here the estimate for a maximum is 15%. So 14% of founders in Lebanon are actually Muslim and female. So I also get a bit of an explanation of why they chose this, and then I can click next and understand what was another question that they answered. So for example, for talent pool, they in Lebanon asked, what is the share of engineers among entrepreneurs? Because for them, this was important as an indicator of how talented their entrepreneurs are, how tech savvy their entrepreneurs are, because founders that can program, founders that are engineers can build, let's say, more valuable companies because they have an unfair advantage, right? Another question to me is, in Berlin, how does that look like? And I would say the share of engineers in Berlin, I would say there's a good number, right? So I would say that's pretty good. It's not great. I think it's not the city with the most engineers, but there's a good number. And I see here, okay, Lebanon had 27%. 27% of founders had engineering background. And then you see also a comparison here of a very good result, which is London, 28%. So you have a feeling for the dimension. And if you say, okay, if London has 28, Berlin, I feel actually personally it might be true that it's around that number here in Berlin. Maybe it's like 20, but you know, my feeling is like this. So to get to know the tool, it's enough to just go with a feeling. Of course, later on you want to find out the number, but now the task is to get to know the tool and fill all the categories and get an idea. So now I go on, and the next one was share of mentors with own startup experience as a measure for the quality of startup support. So how many mentors in my local startup scene have started a company themselves? Why is that important? Of course, the quality of accelerator programs depends to a certain degree on the experience of their mentors, right? And as we remember, the engine are founders giving back, so that's quite important. And I think in Berlin, that's quite a lot, because there's a lot of entrepreneur-driven programs here, so I would say it's a lot, right? And now here you see Berlin, a lot. That would translate to 37% in the real world. Because, for example, here in Lebanon, we know 34%, that was the highest that they ever had in history. They measured this also some years back, and they said 34%, that's the highest we ever had. And now, at the moment in Lebanon, there is a bit of a crisis. People are moving away because the economy is down, so they actually have trouble finding good mentors. So at the moment, it's 15%. So we see Berlin would outperform Lebanon here because they have a lot of trouble in this area. Now we would go further and we look at the question of specialization and diversification. Here the question is our ecosystem focused on one sector only? For example, we are only good in fintech, or is our ecosystem diversified and we have a lot of different sectors that are equally strong? And in Berlin, I would say fintech is not even that strong. I would say probably it's more diverse than just one area. Yeah, and that's the similar result in Lebanon. In Lebanon, there's actually a very diverse result, 85 out of 100, and we now estimated 72 for Berlin. I feel that could be true. Maybe it could be even higher. I would say 85 might be also our result. Okay, so I've done this and I go further and I ask network density. So what is the quality of the networks that I have in my ecosystem? For example, here we had the share of accelerator participants from outside the city. Yes, that was important in Lebanon because they said, okay, are we able to network more cities together? Are we able to connect more than one city? And yeah, also in Berlin, we have that hub. You can meet people here from everywhere. Accelerator participants come from all over the world. So I would say a lot. There's a lot here. And yeah, actually in Lebanon, it was not so much the case, that only 8%. And now this would translate, a lot would translate in real world for Berlin to 33%. And that would allow us to see that we are in the green area here. Great. Yes, so the next one is innovation culture. So how open is our society for innovation? Yeah, one question here in Lebanon was the share of investment deals with foreign investors. So are we accepting foreign investors to come in, or are we shutting them off? Do we want foreign investors to be part of our innovation ecosystem? That was an important question in Lebanon. And now if we also look at Berlin, I would say foreign investors, there's actually quite many also in Berlin, I would say. So I will see here my result. Actually, Lebanon is not showing here. There's an error. As we said, it's a beta version, whereas Lebanon disappeared. It's not hidden behind Berlin. Okay, but Berlin would end up here. And actually, you see London, United Kingdom, 32% is a very good result as an example. Here's Lebanon outside of the screen here. So that would be already quite good. Lebanon has even more, so it's very dependent on foreign investors and also very open. Okay, good. And then finally, we also asked about policies. Do founders like the regulations in the country where we are? Or do they dislike it and say we want to move away? That's a good indicator for understanding the quality of policies, because if founders accept to start their company in that very jurisdiction, they say the regulations are not so bad for me to move away. So the share of startups with no international headquarter is a measure for the quality of policies, one could say. And for Lebanon, that's of course an important question, because due to the crisis, there's a lot of exodus of startups, and yeah, so they are afraid that there's a lot of startups leaving. In Berlin, I would say there's almost none that would set up their headquarters outside, at least in the beginning. Maybe later on for fundraising they might. So let's say a few. So yeah, and actually we saw that also Lebanon has actually a good number. So their fear was not so justified. 80% have still their headquarters locally, and Berlin 76. I think it's better. So if I see average Europe, I would say we're at 95, something like this, right? So most startups would be registered here in Germany. And then I go on and look at international connectivity as the last category. And here the question was, how often do we get mentioned in European startup blogs, so international startup blogs? How often do they talk about our ecosystem? And if I look at the startup blogs in Berlin, then I would say all the time. And then actually that results here in a very green result, 66 mentions, Stockholm 60, Berlin 66. I think that that could relate, right? Lebanon only 5 mentions, so that might be less visible. Good, so now I run through the 8 categories. I answered the same questions as Lebanon did, and I will also get the results that I can see here. And the tool will spit out my results, and it will show me where did I compare worse than Lebanon and where did I compare better. And you see here the red ones, I didn't do so well: diversity and inclusivity, innovation culture, and then knowledge and talent is yellow, it's also not so good. The rest is green. Of course, I did a bit of an unfair comparison, Berlin versus Lebanon. So based on these results, also the tool will give me some reading tips. No? It will say these are the 3 sectors that you didn't have like full the high score. So you can read up on a couple of examples how to improve your innovation culture, for example, or your diversity, as I showed you before. In the near future, you will also have the chance to download this and to publish it on this very platform. So there will be 2 more buttons that will allow you to publish your results so others can see and can learn from you, or download it to use it in a presentation, to save it for later, etc. And if you want to use, if you want to change some of your inputs, you can even click here and enter your number that you now want to put. So this is of course just a preview and allows you to play through the health check. If you then really want to do the health check, you can come back to here, downloads, and actually access the full toolkit that allows you to do the full health check yourself here in the toolkit that's playing out in a Google Sheet. Good. So now that I explained you the website and how it works, we also want to hear from some real-world examples of 2 or 3 cases who have used it. And actually Cambodia is here with us and Albania is here with us. So I would say we start with Albania because Sarah is with us, and I stopped sharing my screen and would invite Sarah Usinger from Swisscontact, who executed with us the health check in Albania, to maybe quickly share your experience of running the health check.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I hope everybody can hear me. And I'm trying to share my screen because I have a small presentation prepared. No, I'm not allowed, but that's okay because I have the presentation here. So I will just open it on my mobile phone and just.
And now you're allowed. Sorry, that was me.
So now no. Anyway, no problem. Just about me, 2 minutes or 1 minute. My name is Sarah. I'm from Germany, but I've been working for a project here in Albania for the past 2.5 years. That was called EU for Innovation. And part of our goals was to improve the startup ecosystem and really focus on building a sustainable ecosystem. And some of the challenges we faced was that, and why we ended up like supporting also the ecosystem health check and participating, was that the startup ecosystem in Albania is growing, but it's still in a very, very early stage. And that means that the usual indicators to measure success of a startup ecosystem, such as investments made, exits, number of unicorns or whatever, they don't really apply to our ecosystem yet. So we were always lacking some ways to measure us. And of course, especially in the early stages, we figured out there is very little data available because everybody is doing a little bit and people are working, but because everybody knows each other, the importance of data isn't very, very ingrained in the ecosystem. So we have very, very little data that is available to everyone. And of course, without data and indicators, it's very hard to define the goals for the ecosystem. And we did the social network analysis in 2019, which was a helpful tool, but it is also a tool that is focusing more on the relationships between ecosystem actors. And it's also something that is too work intense to do it every year or every half a year, and you don't come out with indicators. So it's a great tool and it was very, very useful for us, but at the same time we lacked this thing that we could use to measure things on the go a little bit more. And just a brief info about how we did this ecosystem health check here in Albania, because I think it was a little different from other ecosystems, because what we did is we brought a group of ecosystem actors together. So we had representatives from actors, from communities, from the media, startup media, but also from donor organizations. And we brought we were like around 8 or 9 people brought together to work on this health check together. And yeah, so we had a 2-day workshop pretty much with around 8 people. And for us, the lessons learned, I think it was the best possible idea to really bring those people together, because I think it helped us as an ecosystem or the ecosystem actors to really create a more shared vision of where they want to go, because they've been working, even though we were pushing them to collaborate a bit more, and there has been a lot of work done and it's getting much, much better. There's still a lot of people doing in their own bubble doing things. And I think this workshop was a great opportunity to really bring those visions and those ambitions together in one room. And I think one big point that was made during this workshop, that you don't need to wait for external actors to push the ecosystem or to develop the ecosystem. And often the feeling is that you don't have the tools or the ability to develop this ecosystem. And I think these 2 days showed very, very clearly that there's a lot that can be done bottom up. And of course, it's great if the government supports or if lots of players are entering the markets, but there is still a lot that can be done. And it also showed how much has already been done. So I think that was a great motivational aspect. And I think looking especially at the health check, I think it solved our challenge of not having proxies or indicators to measure success. So we found something that helps us better understand what's going on in the ecosystem, where we stand, where we want to go and why we are actually doing that. And I think it's also a great tool to encourage donor organizations to use, because I think there's also a lot, like, coming from this perspective. I think we also have this challenge: what do we measure? What do we measure in younger ecosystems? And I think in the future it might help, or it might be something that also could be implemented with donor organizations to also help them to define better indicators for their projects and get away from these usual suspects that of course work but might not work long term. And that's not because the donor organizations don't want, but I think it's because we lack the capacities or the ideas sometimes what to measure and the tools to do so. And I think that's where the health check comes in. And I think it also pushes people to collect data. So I think that's the side effects beyond having something really nice to share and insightful data and an insightful overview. It's also pushing the right buttons with people to really focus on data and analyzing what's going on. And then last but not least, I was asked for tips and challenges from Thomas. And I think one that's pretty obvious is the more data you have ahead of the workshop, the easier it gets. So I think that's something that can be pushed a bit more to really force people or really encourage people to bring data and bring it in a way that people can work with it. One thing that I find a bit hard to articulate, but what I figured out is, because we've been talking a lot about the why of the ecosystem, so what's the purpose and what's the personal motivation, and I think there it would help to benchmark it against a functioning ecosystem to figure out if that why is enough to attract the support and external capacities to actually build the ecosystem. Because it's always nice to like it's a little bit hard to define, but I think for me that would be important to make sure that that the why is enough to actually build a startup ecosystem. And that comes again with, especially in very early stage ecosystems, I think there is a lack of common understanding, a lack of experience about other ecosystems. So I think it also helps, and I think that's what this platform is also helping with, to really make sure that the right things are measured. Because I mean, if we are in our bubble, we tend to measure what we know and what we are aware of and what we are comfortable with. But I think it's also, like, again, coming back to the point I mentioned before, to really focus on the things that really matter to push the ecosystem and open the perspective. Yeah, and last but not least, I think one point I would really encourage to do is to also have a discussion on how working and collaborating with other ecosystems internationally would help to fill some of the gaps that are identified. But overall, I think it was a great experience for all of us. Everybody was really happy after, and like, you feel that things are falling into places, and that's helping a lot. And you're getting a bit more of a framework. So thank you very much for everything and for taking the trip to Albania.
Thank you, Sarah. So thank you for the kind words. And I mean, to give that back, of course, the people in the room that use the tool, they make it worthwhile. They bring these insights together, and a tool is only as good as its users. So I think that you really had a perfect group there to come to the conclusions that you did. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And then we also have another example from Cambodia. Sopara, welcome to the group. And maybe also from your side, how did you experience using the ecosystem health check in Phnom Penh?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
I would like to share with my slide. Can you see it?
Yes, we see it. Perfect.
Okay, and good evening from Cambodia, and nice to meet you all here. And and glad to see the startup ecosystem has stay inventive and especially step forward into the digital platform. I think that it's more comfortable, yes, and first of all, I would like to introduce a bit about myself. I am Sapara, currently a startup development specialist at the Joe Startup Center, and we are a center that staging under umbrella of the Ministry of Economic and Finance, and we build the emerging tech startup burnout as innovation that can be launched and scale up. In the simple word, we would like to see the startup become the successful business, and we also would like to see our startup ecosystem stay innovate and grow day by day. And yeah, this is about our 4 dimensions that we are focusing on. The first one is about the startup nurturing, that we provide a startup supporting program to the startup, to the low-cost startup, and we also have some research that we would like to track what's happening in our startup ecosystem, and we also build a digital platform to support the startup ecosystem in Cambodia, and we also provide a community program to our stakeholder in the ecosystem. And yes, I am here today to sharing you about our experience using the startup ecosystem health check toolkit that was introduced by Swisscontact and Deep Ecosystem in 2021 in September. And why we interested in using this toolkit? Because the research is also one of our GOR, and research will tell us what exactly happened or impact to our startup ecosystem, and as well as what is the weakness that we would like to improve it. And so when the Swisscontact introduced us this toolkit, we was feel interested in it, and it is also one of the things that we would like to involve in it. And besides that, this toolkit will provide us a validate insight that we can use to check whether our startup ecosystem is on the right track, something like that. And this is about, we can say that it is the benefit that the Joe Startup Center in Cambodia can benefit from it. The first one, it spend less time and less cost. Because based on our traditional research that we do focus on the fintech startup, we can see that we spend more time and more cost, and we often can do it by I mean that we can do it more often. We do it only sometimes 3 years and to 5 years, something like that. But with this toolkit, we can get the KPI dashboard by ourselves, and we can track what we are now and where we are want to be reached out to. And the second one is about the real-time tracking on the regular basis. It means that unless we have the data, we can input into this toolkit, and we can see what is different from our previous KPI, something like that. And the last one, we will have the own ecosystem KPI dashboard. Without this toolkit, maybe we can invest more money to do the research, and we will be seeing a lot of what is the KPI should be included in the method, something like that. But with this, they provide the metrics, the option of metric or proxy to be choose to be fit to our contact, something like that. And besides that, we also have the lesson learned that I can say that it is the challenge that we are facing during doing it, but it is like a small challenge maybe. The first one is what should be the proxy of each metric. For example, this one on the diversity and inclusivity, we may think that what proxy that we should choose. For example, we have share of female founder, we have share of foreign-born founder, and we have share of a color founder, something like that. And maybe we need to exercise ourselves a bit what to choose and to be fit into our Cambodia context, something like that. And the second one is about what should be the benchmark. Benchmark is also one of the challenge that we are facing. For example, we don't want to compare ourselves to multiple countries, but unfortunately we can't do it because we need the data to do it. And if we choose one country, if we compare Cambodia to Singapore, so all we need is the data at based in Singapore that we have. And if we don't have, maybe we can pick to the neighbor country like Vietnam and Thailand, something like that. And from our case, we would like for the next using this toolkit, we would like to use our previous Kpi dashboard to be the best line that we could compare it to ourselves. Yeah. And the last one is about the available data that sometimes we don't have some data. For example, the Digital Staff Center, we work closely with the startup team so that we can have all the data about related to the startup. But if we talk about the investor or stakeholder, maybe we don't have enough. So we would like to request it from our partner, something like that. And if they have, they will provide us. And if they don't have, maybe we will need to exercise ourselves a little bit. And for example, like this one, the network density, Cambodia, there is no platform that can be count all the meetup related to the startup ecosystem in Cambodia at all. Yeah, it's a bit challenge for us. So we need to count it from the manual method from the social media, something like that. Yeah, and this is our case study that we have doing so far, and we can see that we are lack of the innovation culture, the policy, the international connectivity, as well as the network density. And for this year, we commit to update this data per semester, per year. Yeah. So I think that maybe I can experience using the startup ecosystem platform that we are launching today. Yeah. That's all for me. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you so much, Sapara. Thank you for presenting the results also here. It was, for me, it was a fantastic journey to get to know the Phnom Penh startup scene, and the health check at least allowed me to get an insight in what's happening on the ground and in a very structured way. So it feels like I've spent many months there, even though it was just a couple of sessions. So I think also it's a great conversation, a starter to get a glimpse of what's happening on the ground. So thank you so much. And I have a final word from a third case that couldn't join us in person due to the time difference, but we are in Guatemala, and I will share the message from Andrea Mazariegos from Guatemala and how she experienced the ecosystem health check. Just a second.
Hello, my name is Andrea Mazariegos and I am an ecosystem builder from Guatemala City. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience in running an ecosystem health check through answering some questions. So the first one is, why was there a need to run an ecosystem health check? And for me, the need was that I needed to really understand some indicators about the behavior and the gaps and the existing challenges of my entrepreneurial ecosystem in a way that was simple to do, that did not require a full-on investigation, and that enabled me to have, I would say, a global vision of what was going on in my entrepreneurial ecosystem. The outcomes related to running an ecosystem health check were for me to find which were the biggest gaps and whether or not the interventions that I had designed were effective in closing those specific gaps that I had. And I could compare myself to other entrepreneurial ecosystems, and it was really enlightening to see that some of the areas that I thought were the most challenged ones were actually not. So it was really interesting for me to discover how my ecosystem was behaving, but also how it compared to other more developed ecosystems in other different parts of the world. The tool helped me to have this global vision of what my ecosystem looked like. Also, it helped me to engage with some of the actors that I had lost contact with, and it also enabled me to have this baseline to measure the impact of the interventions that we were applying as ecosystem builders here in Guatemala. So overall, it's really, really useful and really interesting to observe how the indicators and the KPIs behave according to the changes that we are implementing in the ecosystem. And measuring ecosystem growth and health is really complicated because it's mostly related to behavioral changes, and that is extremely complicated to address, especially if you don't have time or resources to run, let's say, a social network analysis of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So for me, it was really, really important to have access to an ecosystem health check. My advice for ecosystem builders when they are running the ecosystem health check is to remember that this is just a starting point for you to really understand what's going on in your ecosystem, and it's going to give you a lot of information for you to design tools and interventions to address the gaps that you find. Is going to give you a global outlook of what's happening. It's going to compare you to other entrepreneurial ecosystems, and thus you're going to have a lot of useful information to create better interventions.
So I think that the recording stopped there, and we are not able to see the full video. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but I think we got at least like the gist of it. And yes, thank you to Andrea for sharing her her impressions as well with us. Yes, so I think now we are at the end already of our little launch event. So I want to take the chance to thank everyone for being part of this. Not only today here in the room, but throughout the process. You have seen it started already last year. We have worked with more than 7 ecosystems all around the world to develop it, to test it. And now the platform is out there for even more people to try it out, play around with it, send us feedback, give us your ideas, start to measure your ecosystems, learn to work with data, and yes, get in touch with us, ask your questions, see how this can help you, tell us how it can help you, and together we can advance even further in the subject of ecosystem building. So thank you, everyone, and yes, let me close the event then with these words.